Welcome back, everyone. We previously talked about the battery that is going to move you forward towards your goals and your identity, the identity that you actually want. The energy in that battery is going to make sure you can do the things you need to accomplish to achieve those goals. That being the case, we either want to be able to recharge our battery super quickly whenever it gets drained, or we just want to have a bigger battery. Well, in this analogy, I think what's going to determine the size of your battery is, in essence, your level of happiness and how passionate you are. So let's talk about happiness first. The book Happiness Advantage by Shawn Achor talks about how the formula for happiness is broken. You see, most people think that happiness is the end result of being productive or being successful, that it's something you have to earn. But the problem is, once we finish a goal, we just establish a new goal for ourselves. And the result is that we keep pushing our earned happiness further and further into the future. But what research has really found, according to Shawn, I'm sure he's cool with me calling him Shawn, we're tight like that, is that people who work on being happy first, as a result, are far more productive and are able to accomplish so much more in their lives. So why is this? Well, everyone probably has already heard or is familiar with the concept of fight or flight. The idea that under some sort of fear or high stress situation, we're going to kick in our basic sort of lizard brain programming, and we're either going to fight or we're going to run away. And the important concept here is that it's sort of a binary choice. In that state of fear or high stress, we really need to limit our thinking for our survival. The program doesn't want you to waste time thinking about a choice or trying to figure out what's happening when survival is on the line. This is why you have to do something like training if you want to be a boxer or an MMA competitor. The old Tyson quote is true that everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So the opposite of fight or flight is the theory of broaden and build. You see, under positive stress or stress-free of circumstances, we have the ability to broaden or think up a number of possibilities and creative ideas. You see, happiness has two hormones associated to it that are released into the brain, dopamine and serotonin. It's been shown that both dopamine and serotonin are linked to helping us organize our thoughts, and they actually assist in learning and storing information. Achor summarizes that happy people think more clearly, happy people have more of a capacity for creativity, they're more engaged with their goals, and they understand how to rise above obstacles. They have higher emotional intelligence, and they're just optimistic by nature. So the idea of sacrificing your pleasure and your happiness now for productivity, it's a trap. It's much more powerful to figure out how to be in a state of happiness or making tasks in general more pleasurable. So how do we become more happy if your current paradigm has it related to first accomplishing goals? Naval Ravikant says, you choose to be happy, then you work on it, because in life you have three options: either change it, accept it, or leave it. So you can become happy. It's not something that is pursued, it's something you create. There was a study actually that determined that only about 10% of your happiness is generated from the result of external forces, meaning that 90% of your happiness potential is from your own perception or thoughts. Perception is everything. And you're going to have to get comfortable with the idea that you do have some control over your perception. Some people out there, for instance, always look at setbacks as energizing instead of overwhelming. Ryan Holiday, he wrote a whole book about Stoicism and how the obstacle is the way, the meaning that whatever stands in the way becomes the way. Our perception should be focusing on being realistic about the present and maximizing our potential for the future. We have to eliminate past regrets, and we need to eliminate any sort of dread for the future. There was a crazy study in the book Happiness Advantage that talked about students and poison ivy. What it talked about is they had two groups of students. One group that had poison ivy rubbed on their arms and were told that it wasn't, and one group that had some other sort of plant rubbed on their arms but was told it was poison ivy. The vast majority of the people that were told that it wasn't poison ivy when it was, they didn't actually have a reaction. The skin didn't blotch, it didn't get red, it didn't get itchy. Whereas the individuals who had a benign plant rubbed on their skin but was told it was poison ivy, they actually had blisters and rashes in the actual response that you would have from poison ivy. Why? Because the brain is incredibly powerful and your perception of what's going to happen can sometimes manifest that. So how can you actually make your brain more happy? The first is a common concept, which is to scan for positive. At the end of the day, you write down 3 things that you were grateful for or that were positive that day, and they have to have happened that day. And you see what happens at first is this is incredibly hard to actually accomplish. You're scouring your thoughts trying to figure out what was it that happened today that was really good. But the more you do it, the brain starts to get wired to perceive the positive aspects of your day in the moment, not retroactively. A great negative example of that in the book Happiness Advantage was with accountants. You see, there are certain professions out there that they are trained to look for mistakes, always looking for mistakes in the work they do. And what happens is the brain gets very good at trying to do that even outside of work in everyday situations. And that negative aspect can compound and increase stress. It's called the Tetris effect. So we want to develop this skill for the positive things in our lives. The next idea is taking more control or being mindful of our counterfacts. The counterfacts that we tell ourselves. You see, counterfacts are the stories we tell ourselves to explain situations we deal with in our day. Memory in general is a reconstruction of what actually happened. It's not a perfect telling. We usually have very emotional, solid memories, and we fill in the narrative, the gaps in between. Now, how we fill that in can either be positive or negative. A negative counterfact are feelings that the event that had happened was never ending, and it was a big natural global event, nothing that you could control. A positive counterfact are feelings that whatever happened to us was actually a temporary, quick moment, very localized event, odds of it happening slim. Now, to get good at this, I mentioned before that you have to be mindful, and the best way to achieve that is through meditation. You see, meditation is truly the act of being aware of our thoughts, the thoughts in our heads, and not only just aware of them, but why we're thinking them. It's transformative. And I personally like using the meditations from 10% Happier, the app and the website. So what are some other tips besides meditation that help make us happy in general? Well, looking forward to something in the future, setting something up like an actual event or a day or a calendar, whatever the case is, setting something up in the future that you can look forward to, random acts of kindness to others, surrounding ourselves with positive people. I think there's a great video by Shu Omi that talks about the concept of you are a reflection of the 5 people that you most hang out with in your life. So making sure those 5 people are the type of people you want to be is important. Exercise, exercise, exercise. As a physical therapist, I can tell you that's top of the list. Spend money on experiences, not just things. And utilize your strengths during the day, not just your weaknesses, which means that you have to actually decipher what your strengths are. That's very important. Finally, just go outside, be in nature. It's actually very important to individuals' happiness. Another great tip for dealing with the present is something called the Zorro effect. This was another exercise that Sean discusses where if you have a massive task or project to complete, you can always just break it down into its smallest granular pieces. The more you can do that, the less insurmountable whatever it is feels. And the more you're able to actually tackle and build sort of confidence, build and motivate and snowball. My advice, which is a trap that I fall down all the time, is don't try and do all these things at once. Don't put on your schedule that tomorrow you're going to meditate, find 5 new best friends, go outside and exercise and yada, 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 and do it all at once. Experiment. Try a couple of these things. See how it fits. But understand that your perception of a situation is incredibly powerful, and that you actually have a lot more control over it than you realize. Next up, we'll talk about passion, the other aspect that builds the size of our battery.